the industry and market section of this festival have, of course, spent a lot of time, do spend a lot of time over the years thinking about the changes in the industry, which are indeed massive, and about in what ways we can support the industry as a whole in the Nordic countries with struggling with some of these issues. And when you think about this, the big challenge is that everything is connected and everything is happening at the same time, right? So production is changing technically and financially, and funding is changing, distribution is changing, and consumer expectations and markets are changing, globalization, of course, and technological advances and so on. And it's very, very easy to become overwhelmed, because when you start thinking about one of these, you realize I need to know about these 12 other things to be able to have make an informed judgment about this thing over here. Somebody should try to figure that out, we thought. And after a while we realized probably nobody will want to do that, so maybe we should. And this is clearly an impossible task. I would just want to say that up front, this is clearly an impossible task, but that kind of gives us a freedom as well. We don't expect to have all the answers, so let's just start nibbling at the edges. What are the most urgent questions? Is there some part of this that we could perhaps explain and maybe help us take one little step further in our strategies? And our sponsors, given the vagueness of this project, originally our sponsors were incredibly brave to jump on board, so I want to thank them as well. Here's what we did. We started by speaking to a selection. We had like a really long list that many of you are on, of people we would like to talk to about how they feel about the future of the industry. Because we felt that if 5 years is very far in the future right now. Sorry, there goes the glamour. But 3 to 5 years, that is the window, that is where you're all working towards. If you're in a strategic position in the industry, if you're producing film or any kind of content, probably if you're funding it now, it's probably going to happen 2 years or 3 years from now. So the decisions we all make today are shaping that future that is to come. So the individual knowledge of all of us, is actually a very valuable resource in figuring out what's going to happen next. So we got in touch with a number of people, and we had time to speak to 6 of them around Christmas. And those conversations about what's going on and what they feel is happening next are the basis of this report. And this is a sort of year 0 report. This is a where are we now? What is the starting point? And that's what we're trying to establish here. Also, we had a lot of informal conversations. It turned out that some of these issues are very infected, and some people don't want to go on the record criticizing other people in the industry. So some of the opinions here are also informed by names that are not going to be named anywhere in the report. And then we read a lot of other studies that other people have done, a big pile of them. But as you know, there are very many PDFs and PowerPoint presentations on the internet about what's going on in the industry. So of course we haven't read all of them, but a big selection. And what we would like to do with the website as well in the months to come is to curate a selection, so that if you want to go and find the best information, the best publicly available information on some subtopic in this massive field, Nostradamus would be the place for you to go. Let's hope that happens. Yes. I would like to speak about a few things that we thought about what we found out before we go on to the panels that are already taking the content in this report one step further. The first is that overall there was much agreement in the industry. No matter what sector of film and TV production and distribution and so on we spoke to, basically people are in relatively big agreement on what's going to happen next. On some issues, there was no disagreement at all. And what all of those issues have in common is that there is just no data, or that there is very vague data, and that the parties are looking at the available information, and they are judging it very differently depending on what their business model is and what their prejudices are for historical reasons in that sector of the industry. So one clear answer what we need to do in the future is that we do need better information, especially, and we're going to return to this a lot today, about consumer behaviors. And now it's been pointed out to me this week that there is more consumer research than we found. So the first task for Nostradamus after this seminar is to go and read a big pile more of that and to see what's available and what is not available. And I would love for us also to commission some additional studies. That would be great, but let's see if that happens. Second, there is a sort of disconnect I find between individuals working in this market and the understanding of how the future is generated. Yesterday, over a glass of champagne, somebody said to me, "Yeah, it's hell funding things now because the windows are so very, very strict. But 2 years from now, it's going to be very different." Well, yes, but again, the contracts you write today are the market from 2 years from now. So if the positions are locked now and we all keep writing the exact same kinds of agreements we did 1 year ago or 2 years ago, the market is not going to change here in the Nordic countries. It might somewhere else, and that external pressure might turn things around. But it is, I mean, we are all personally responsible for deciding how we want the film and TV market to operate in the near future and to act accordingly and to assert pressure where we feel that the current system is flawed or not optimal. Yes. We also realized that to be able to do this, probably producers who have been very successful in the old paradigm, regardless if you're old or young, we all need sort of better information at digital strategy. We don't know enough. I should say that the Erik Pommer Institute does offer a module in digital strategy for producers. You might want to look into that. But also it seems pretty clear that we should have more master classes and things like that available up here in the Nordic countries. Let's see if we can work with the Erik Pommer Institute to make that happen in the future. Now I'm going to mention 2 additional things that I would just like to have as a sort of basis before we go into the talks that follow. And one has to do with the exhibition windows. I've had maybe 100 conversations about distribution this week, so it feels like already it feels like we know so much more than we did a week ago. So I just like to point out a little bit on a very sort of practical level, what are we talking about when we're talking about maybe shrinking or changing the release patterns. And when we're talking about here at the film festival, of course, we're especially interested in the cinema window and the cinema exhibitors window. And it became very clear this week that the almost monopoly, the majority owners in the film cinema exhibitors industry in Sweden and the Nordic countries certainly said that they are absolutely not interested under any circumstances in any kind of experimentation that threatens the 4-month exclusivity of the cinema exhibitors. So what is this threat that they are talking about? I'm just going to break down some alternatives that are available out there. Typically, we talk about the day and date. Some people call it the day-to-date premieres. I haven't been able to find out why these parallel terms are available. And then then that means releasing a film or some kind of content in the cinema at the same time as releasing it digitally, typically on some kind of VOD service, but sometimes maybe on free TV even. So there are some options. But typically, it's VOD, either exactly on the same date or maybe the VOD content comes out a few weeks earlier or a few weeks later. But basically, that's what we're talking about when we're talking day and date. There are also other models. One of these is that you have that you release something significantly earlier on some other platform than you do in the cinemas. So, for instance, we have an example of that here in Sweden now that's been advertised quite a lot. Triart are making an experiment like this together with Telia, where the VOD release is 2 weeks from now and the cinema release will be in July. But there are also other examples. I was told yesterday about Klaus Härö's TV film from a few years back, which was screened on free TV on Yle in Finland, and after that it sold over 100,000 tickets in cinemas. So there are case studies that seem counterintuitive as to how these things could work. Now, the opposition of cinema exhibitors to these models is based on the assumption that the customers are paying for the exclusivity of the window. And this might be right, and it might not be right. We're going to talk about this a lot today as well, I think, and you can read much more about this. Michael Gubbins, who is here today, has been part of doing some incredibly interesting evaluations for the British Film Institute of case studies in England. We're going to link to those on the website so you can read and judge them for yourself. But basically, the jury is still out. for some movies, it seems that the exclusivity is not key for the cinema windows. And it would also seem that for some audience categories, some types of moviegoers, they're going to go to the cinema even when as we see with the Klaus Herre example, also a movie called A Field in England, which was released in England on free TV on the day of the premiere. Even though it is available on free TV, people will still choose to see some types of content in the movies. But not all people. Some people will. But we don't know exactly who they are, and this is a bit of a challenge. Cinema exhibitors are also worried, and this is a very valid worry, that the earlier you have a digital version around on the internet, the earlier it's going to be ripped and be available for pirates. So if we think of piracy as a window, the piracy window is going to be brought forward closer to the cinema premiere. And how to judge this is very difficult. Some movies, again, have been available as pirated versions because of regional release patterns. They've been available online pirated when the Nordic premieres have been, for instance, and that may or may not have affected cinema going. We just don't know. But there would seem to be, if we put piracy aside, and I'm going to return to that in like 2 minutes, but if we put piracy aside for a little while, it would still seem to be one field that everybody should be able to agree on cutting the window a little bit. Let's say I make a film here in Sweden and it's very successful. And now with digital distribution, I can release it on very many screens at the same time. Maybe it's a big family movie and it's going to do really well in theaters for 10 to 12 weeks. Right, that's a realistic estimate. After that, ticket sales are going to be basically nothing. And then there's still a 4 to 6 week window where nothing is happening. Nobody's making any money. The cinemas are not losing money because they're done with the product. But me as a producer or distributor, I'm not making any money. And I think this is important to remember because when we speak about this, cinema exhibitors sometimes say everybody who wants to experiment with these windows is stealing money from us by undermining the system. Here is a case, I think, for producers and distributors to say, hang on, in these cases, in this specific case, cinema exhibitors are stealing money from us. Maybe we can talk, right? Yes. I have written absolutely nothing in this report about piracy because I think if you love movies, if you make your living from movies and television, everybody hates piracy. There's just no controversy about this at all. Everybody wants piracy stopped. Some actors, I do mention some players in the market are starting to say that they may be seeing that piracy is actually operating as free advertising for them. But I understand that most of us will never embrace that approach to piracy. Okay, so that's, we all want to stop it. And I want to say a few things about that because, of course, again, when we're talking about the windows, the cinema exhibitors are referring to piracy. They say we're not going to be at a table with anyone who makes money off piracy. This is my personal view as a sort of consumer and just like as somebody who's not a party to this conflict other than as somebody who just loves film. Maybe we're going to have to stop saying that internet service providers make money off piracy. Maybe we just should stop telling them that because it may not actually be true. It may be, these days what the product that they sell is fast internet connections. And everybody wants those. And we don't want them because we're pirates. We want them because we're on YouTube and because we play online games and we use legal streaming services. Everybody wants high-speed internet now. And everybody buys it on a flat rate basis. It would seem to me logically that the internet service providers are losing money on piracy just like everybody else because they're losing the opportunity to have a VOD service and charge for that content twice. And one way perhaps to stop the conflict here is to stop calling them criminals. Aha, you say, but in Sweden, certainly, the internet service providers have not been very helpful in stopping piracy, like they very successfully have in Denmark and also Finland. I didn't know about it. I live in Denmark. I didn't know that piracy has been stopped in Denmark until 50 people told me that this week. I'm really sorry to break this to you, but piracy has not been stopped in Denmark. Here, if you wanna download a movie I don't do this because I work in public service, and if I was exposed, I would lose my job, and that's one of the main reasons for that. I'm sorry, if I'm quite honest, that's the reason. So I called around all of my Danish friends, and they say, "Oh no, you install a plugin. It takes 1 minute in your browser, and then the problem is away." So I'm really, really sorry. This is heartbreaking. But if your friends in Denmark and Finland told you we have no piracy, it's, that's because you work in the film industry. They are lying. The Danish piracy does not show up in the Danish statistics because they're using ISPs in other countries. Maybe part of the Swedish piracy problem is actually all the Danish pirates. And I'm really sorry to say this, but that is not until we can get all of the countries in the world and all of the ISPs in the world to collaborate in stopping piracy. We can't solve this problem this way. And maybe we can do that. I don't think so, but maybe we could, but it's going to take at least 10 years, and you cannot rely on that as a strategy. We're going to have to put that aside and say that is not the answer. So you can't use that as an argument in the sort of Nordic debate. Should we make it harder to download? Absolutely. Should we prosecute these services that are selling ads on sites or like Swefilm? Absolutely. Just bring down the hammer on them. Probably don't bring down the hammer on the consumer. That seems like making war on your customers. That's stupid. But yeah, sure, don't let people profit from illegal activity. But again, probably your enemy is not the internet service providers. I just would have put that out there. Yes. So I was also told this week that piracy is the reason that DVDs are dying. I would like to question the logic of this. I don't believe it's true. Piracy has accelerated the cultural change that has killed DVDs and also CDs. And in fact, this is an overall cultural change that has to do with the ownership of physical copies of media. Also books, as you know, of course, are becoming more and more sort of virtual objects. And piracy has absolutely accelerated this change, but it would have happened anyway. Piracy is not the killer of DVDs. Cloud services and high-speed internet and live streaming are the killer of DVDs. The hopeful thing is that in the music industry, music festivals and concerts are making more money than ever, probably, and it's very likely that the same, or very possible, I'm going to open this to the jury, to the panel as well. It's quite possible that the exact same thing will happen with going to the movies, that you pay for an experience rather than a physical product. Yes. This is what I had to say before we start. Now I would like to introduce, it's my great pleasure to ask Jonathan Olsberg, founder and chairman of Olsberg SPI, to come and talk to us for a little while. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Johanna. And while we're setting up, I'm going to grab a glass of water. Just a word about our company. So Olsberg SPI is a strategy consultancy that for about 20 years or so has been advising clients in the film, TV and digital media worlds relating to future strategy, whether it's business strategy for companies or whether it's sort of policy issues for public entities, screen agencies, film institutes, national, regional, city-based, supranational, etc. And what I'm going to talk about today comes from the work that we've done in this area, various things that we've researched or observed, and that we think might be relevant for the rest of your discussions. I really want to thank Sia and Johanna very much for inviting me. I'm always delighted to come to Sweden and to Gothenburg, one of my favorite cities. And I also want to congratulate them and everybody on holding this event and undertaking this Nostradamus initiative, which is critically important. We're in a period of transition at the moment, and there's no doubt that eventually new business models and new ways of doing things will emerge and become clearer. I think the Nostradamus initiative will play a major role in that happening. What I've been asked to do for the next 15 minutes or so is look sort of beyond the 3 to 5 year time frame in a way at a number of issues that I think we're going to see a radical change. I know the panels later on are going to delve very deeply, and it's going to be very interesting to see what they have to say about key, very important business model changes in distribution and cinema windows, etc. I'm going to try and look a little bit beyond that, a bit further down the line. Much of what I'm saying will already be happening, so you'll recognize very many things, but I think what's hard to identifies the pace and magnitude of change. When will things actually come about, and what will be the size and impact? What I also want to say is that what I'm going to be referring to may seem like threats to our business. I don't see it that way. I think everything that I'm going to address is an opportunity. We just have to figure out the best way for us as individuals, our companies, our organizations, to take advantage of these opportunities. So that's really what I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so yes, there we are, technology. I'm going to talk about 5 different topics. I'm going to talk about the end of traditional cinema release and why that's not a problem. I'm going to talk about the end of reference distribution and using the concept circulation as being critical in the lives of producers and funders. We're going to talk about some familiar areas, I'm sure, for you of how technology is driving radical change in production. Also referring to the end of film schools as we know them. And finally, something you'll probably be familiar with, which is the creative economy and how the film industry but needs to be much more vocal and visible as being in the center of the debate about the creative economy, which in terms of governments is the big game at the moment. Okay, so let's talk about cinema release. What are we talking about when we talking about going to the cinema? By and large, it's an out-of-home, shared entertainment experience. People go with other people, mostly. The audiences, consumers, as I'm going to mostly refer to them nowadays, generally speaking, especially younger audiences, are demanding a very much more intense, immersive experience when they go to the cinema. That's been referred to before. In terms of windows might not be so important if the experience you get at the cinema is unlike any other experience that you will get at home. So this concept of out-of-home shared entertainment, which has been around a long time, is critical for us. But there's a problem. Among young people, I'm going to use that phrase quite a bit. I suppose we're talking about our sons, daughters, grandchildren, in my case, or whatever. Young people have found a way to enjoy a shared entertainment experience in the home through shared gaming. And we're going to find more and more, I believe, that they will be watching content, movies, whatever it might be, at home on their own, but sharing that experience at the same time with their friends and with colleagues. So that's going to affect dramatically, I think, in future years, the way in which cinema sells its wares. Because the fact is that going to the cinema, for many young people especially, is a very, as I said before, an intense, immersive experience. It's an event. And we have to work harder and harder to encourage future audiences when we're developing or in pre-production of our films to be aware of this experience coming down the line so that they want to see it as and when it comes out. Now, those of you who are involved in running cinemas, especially cinemas that cater for what I'm going to call specialized films, but I really mean the films that all of us make or have made, there's massive competition for audiences, for eyeballs, not just in terms of other things that people can do out of home, but as we've learned, what people can do inside the home. In European terms, in 2012, which is the last year for which thorough statistics are available, there were over 1,300 feature films made just in Europe. I mean, how on earth can we find slots for these films to be shown in the cinema? And if that wasn't excuse me, enough of a problem, we've got the issue of alternative content or event cinema, which is to say other kinds of content that cinema owners are very keen to show. In the UK, the leading cinema company for more specialized films is Curzon Cinemas. They, last year, were predicting that very soon a third of their revenues would come from alternative content, operas, sports events, theatre, whatever it may be. Now that's going to squeeze specialized our cinema out of the picture. The good news, of course, is that older audiences still love going to the cinema. There aren't that many opportunities for older people to get out of the home shared entertainment experiences other than restaurants. They tend not to go quite so much to other kinds of activities. So the cinema is important, and they're less interested in the immersive 3D experience as they are in story. So that's a market that we need to continue to focus on, obviously. But we're up against a fair amount of competition in that event cinema world. And if those of you who are familiar with the phenomenon, the unexpected phenomenon recently of the Doctor Who 50th year anniversary day and date global event, will know that we've got challenges ahead of us. There are fewer slots for our films at the cinema, so we have to work much harder to create awareness among our consumers, our audience, that what's coming up is a must-see event. And I think that that work is work that the producer has to do very early in the process. I mean, we've seen the impact of Kickstarter and other similar sites to encourage, in this case, investors to get excited about projects before they've even been dreamt up quite often. We've got to use that same interest from consumers around the world to see the films once we've made them, not just to finance them. And the challenge at the cinema is even more critical when you look at what the Hollywood studios are doing. When you look around the world at more commercial cinema, at the sort of movies that are in the top 10 in any year in any particular country, 70% of those movies are based on pre-existing content, pre-existing characters, pre-existing books or plays, sequels, prequels. So, audiences, when they know this title is coming up, already have a frame of reference for what they're likely to see. So those of us who are making new, innovative, movies about heretofore unknown characters have even more of a challenge. So there's enormous pressure on getting your film in the cinema, on this exclusive window, and I think that I'm going to be very interested to hear what the new business models are that the panel will come up with that's going to make a difference and help us figure this one out. Okay, moving on to a factor that is all about the consumer, really. But it's about, in terms of action, this is about actions that the producers need to take and funders need to take, which is to say, let's forget for the moment the traditional distribution business models. Those, sooner or later will disappear and we'll have something different that comes into play. Other ways, new ways of monetizing the experience of a consumer seeing the film. But what we need to do in the meantime, as we're making our films and as we're funding our films, is work much harder on trying to figure out how this circulation of the movie is going to work. So this may be a paid-for experience, or it might not. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I think the start point has got to be abandon the concept of distribution. It's old hat. It doesn't work anymore. And think about how, as a producer or a funder, we're going to get this film circulated in front of people. It starts during the development phase, and it needs to be addressed very early. And I think that public funders should be much more rigorous in demanding of the producers or the applications for funding that they get, that the producer evidences a very clearly thought through strategy for the circulation of their films. By the way, in terms of new ways of monetizing, there's no reason why public funders couldn't take the concept of reward for audience participation or audience take-up, like your PRS structure here, further, which is to say, in terms of future circulation of the films that they're involved with, whether or not an observation or an experience of the film is a monetized transaction, that experience should be counted as being circulation, and then a financial benefit should pass along to the filmmakers. We're really not, this is not clear how this is going to work out, but I think if we start to think about circulation rather than distribution, we will get there. Okay, just quickly, it's quite remarkable and very exciting how technology is radically changing the production world. Nowadays, what we used to call visual effects in post-production starts during development. You know, in many films, Gravity, the movie, is an example of that. And because the democratization of all of this is bringing costs are coming down, we shouldn't think that we can't afford to employ visual effects techniques during the development process as part of our work. But there are other radical things that are happening. For example, virtual actors. There are ads already appearing in the UK featuring Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn and what have you that are based on archive material. There's ways of, there are technological ways of taking an actor for a couple of days in a studio and essentially plotting all of their moves in a film in the future. The Economist in the UK recently did an assessment or analysis of what careers in the future are going to grow and which ones are going to be diminishing. Bad news, by the way, for accountants in the room. You're at the top of the list of those who are going down. But actors were featured quite highly on the careers where diminished opportunities were going to come about. 3D printing is something that seems a little exotic at the moment, but I think in 5 years' time, on set, in terms of props and everything else that are needed of this ilk, there'll be a major 3D printer somewhere in the studio that will be able to create this new prop that the director decides they want to see the next day on set. Although it's not really about production, there's no doubt that the need during the development phase to think about multi-platform, platform agnostic, 360-degree exploitation, whatever you want to call it, is essential. If you're producing a film, there's no way of knowing in 3 years' time what sort of device it's going to be captured on. So those thoughts will have to change the way in which production takes place. I'm obviously racing through this quite quickly, but we can pick up on some themes later on. Right, obviously film schools are not going to end, but perhaps the way they currently operate, they might. Research we did shows that students coming into film schools now, compared to 5 years ago, are at a much higher level of existing competence and experience of making content, of having their material, their movies, their shorts, whatever it is, their videos on Facebook. So they're coming into film schools at a level of competence that in some cases exceeds the level of competence of the institution into which they're being placed, the instructors, the systems, what have you. That's moved very quickly over the last 5 years. I think it's going to move even more quickly in the next 5 years. So that means that the institutes, it's a very broad statement, I realize, are in danger of not keeping up with the demands and needs of their new students. Storytelling skills is still fundamental and critical for film schools, platform agnostic, as it must need to be, but there also must be a much greater emphasis in the film school context on understanding the consumer from the very beginning. So the story, telling the story is critical, but understanding how consumers will see that story is also critical. Doesn't happen very much in film schools. One way of getting through that would be to move much closer to the world of advertising. If there's any entity, any group of people who do understand consumer behavior better than us or anyone else, it is those brand managers and media buyers and others in the world of advertising. So I see in the future what we used to call film schools being institutions for people who want to work in what we call film, TV, whatever we want to call it, as well as the field of advertising. Because what they all need to do is figure out whatever we're making, how is it going to be seen and how do we reach the people. The other thing that's radically changing is getting out of the classroom and into the workplace. Whatever film schools of the future might do, and their students need to spend half their time not at the film school. Okay, my final topic. Many of you will be aware of the creative economy, creative industries, which is this kind of a new definition of a number of sectors, cultural industries that, of which film and TV is one. In the UK, there are now 9 groups, advertising and marketing being one, architecture, crafts, design, or product design, graphic, fashion, film, TV, video, etc., IT, software, computer services, publishing, museums, galleries and libraries, and music, performing and visual arts. When you make a film, or when you make a high-end TV drama, you are spending more money in those other creative industries than any other single creative industry does. So what that means, in political as well as economic terms, is that if a country is interested in growing its creative industries, the best way to do it is to build a very healthy film and TV industry. Because when you're spending money, you're an engine of growth in the creative industries. And just a word about how important these industries are. In the UK, growth in the creative industries, the employment in the creative industries over the last 2 years has grown 8.6% compared to a national average of 0.7%. The gross value added at standard economic term in the creative industries in the last couple of years has grown 15.6% compared to a national average in other industries of 5.4%. Exports, critical for our sector. In between 2009 and 2011, growth of exports in the creative industries, 16.1%, all other industries, 11.5%. The creative industries, in government terms in the UK, is the single most successful and focused upon sector. I think in other countries, particularly in the Nordic countries, getting film and TV on the agenda and getting recognized as a major driver of this growth is going to be very important. And that's sitting alongside the traditional and normal cultural benefits of the industry, gives, essentially builds a fantastic story to tell government about why support for these sectors is so clever and such a smart thing to do. I anticipate in years to come, you will no longer have a film agreement to discuss among government, you'll have a creative industries agreement, and the main seat at the table should be held by our industry. Okay, so that's what I've been very happy to talk to you about. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day if we need to chat, and I'd be always at any point welcome to hear from you on any topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I need to go around here. Okay.
Thank you very much. I was thinking about the virtual actors. Everybody has some limit where they go, no, that's science fiction, that can't happen. Oh, and that's mine. Virtual actors, really? And then you think about the career of Andy Serkis, whose great performances as Gollum and King Kong and so on. He's not wearing his face in those. And perhaps he could also become the future actor of Audrey Hepburn. I mean, I really don't see why that couldn't happen. And there are also some queer theory issues here that are mind-boggling, but there it is.